Welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show, where we help top leaders find their pathway to incredible success and a lifetime of happiness. Here is your host, Tom Dutta, the Quiet Warrior.
All right, Tom Dutta, the Quiet Warrior here. And listen, you probably hear the guitar. That's not me playing. My arms weren't moving, were they? I'd like to introduce you to our guest. I have this really wonderful thing that arrived. It's a hardcover book called Breaking Glass, Tales from the Witch of Wall Street by Patricia Walsh Chadwick. Now, her bio is incredible. It goes on for pages. She's so accomplished. I'm just going to read you something off the back of the book, make it abbreviated. We'll put that in the show notes. Patricia Chadwick was born in Cambridge, Mass. In 1948. She received her BA in economics from Boston University, 30-year career in investment business, culminating as a global partner at Invesco. Today, she sits on a number of corporate boards, blogs on issues social, economic, and political. She also mentors young women in high school and college. In 2016, she co-founded and is the pro bono CEO of Anchor Health Initiative, a healthcare company that serves the needs of the LGBTQ community in Connecticut. She's married, lives in Connecticut with her husband, John. They have a daughter and a son, and I heard that somewhere in the background of her studio now. She's got the grandkids. Well, it's time to bring her on, and welcome to the show, Patricia.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're over where? Where are you sitting right now?
Right now, I'm in Rhode Island.
Rhode Island. Yeah, we were just talking about the weather, and so you're starting to get some humidity, and we're starting a heat wave here. Incredible what's happening in the world. But most importantly, we're here to talk about you. So I'm going to start off with a thought. And tell me what you think about this, Patricia, that if we connect the dots together about what's going on globally in the world, what's going on in our sector where we tend to work, yours would be the financial sector, and then what's going on personally in our lives. If we connect all that together, the interconnectedness might give us deeper insights and meanings about our work. Wouldn't that be fair?
Fair enough. Absolutely.
Well, I want you now I'm going to ask you a question because I read your book. I actually listened to the audiobook and I love it. And we're going to do a review reveal in just a while. So I'm going to start off with the first question for you that came out of that for me. I title this From Cult to Wall Street, A Journey of Resilience. Your journey from being expelled from a religious cult at 17 to becoming a global partner at Invesco is nothing short of extraordinary. It really is. And I love the title, Breaking Glass. So, Patricia, share more about the pivotal moments that shaped the path and how those experiences influence your approach to overcoming challenges on Wall Street.
Well, thank you. There may have been many pivotal moments, but I think the importance about a pivotal moment is that you remember it. And one of the stories or the theme running through this book is one of gratitude for the mentors that I had in my life. And they were all men because I started off as the receptionist at a brokerage firm. I knew nothing about the financial world. All I knew was that at the age of 19, I wanted to be the best receptionist in the world. And that was my endeavor. I thought of the past life that I had had as being ancient history. And the morning I walked into the office as the receptionist, I said to myself, this is a new leaf in my book. And my whole life now lies ahead of me. It wasn't that I would forget what had happened in the past, but I felt this energy. And so one of the things that I learned myself was because I knew so little, the outside world was still strange to me. From my first book, as you know, I had never read a newspaper. I'd never seen TV. I had never gone to a restaurant. And so I had to learn the language of the world. And I was still learning that language as I got this first job. And so I made myself adaptable and I wanted to be invaluable. And for me, that was kind of easy and fun because I kept learning about things. But what happened over time was that someone would have confidence in me and give me an opportunity to do something else. And in doing that, I built up confidence. And those people became mentors. And so my book is dedicated to the mentors in my life. All of them were men, except I give great credence to one woman who was the principal of the school when I was in the cult, before I left. And she was a wonderful, wonderful woman. But all the rest were men. And from that, I've also learned that young women don't just need to say, I can only have a female mentor. Anyone can be your mentor. What you learn is that there's no such thing as a bad mentor. There may be bad role models, but a mentor is a generous person who gives their time and their talent to help you. And it doesn't matter whether they're old, they're young, they're male, they're female. And so that first experience of having somebody who believed in me and trusted me and gave me more opportunity was very rewarding. And through those other pivotal points throughout my career, I was able to associate someone who cared about me and helped me. I hope that's a good way of explaining.
Well, it's your story, everybody. We're here with Patricia Chadwick. Patricia, hold up that book there and just read out the title to us. It's pretty cool.
Oops.
Yeah, read out it. It's perfect. Read the title to us.
So it's Breaking Glass, Tales from the Witch of Wall Street.
And I got one, everybody, and it's fun when you have a author live and they get to send you the book. This is going to be on my shelf. Thanks for showing us that. I'm just going to riff with you, everybody. The show here is built on the narrative of The Hero's Journey by Joe Campbell. It's really about storytelling, right, Patricia? And you do that so well in your book. You see, everybody, what I learned is that when I read Patricia's work or talk to her, you tend to have a typical story. You've got, it's her story. She may be the protagonist, but then comes along something we call enmity. Maybe it's something universally we all can say, I don't like that. It's some kind of danger. And then comes the hope. And then the story goes up and down and up and down. And our brains actually like that because it connects to the emotional side of us, Patricia. That's why I learned so much reading this book. I'm not going to let you get off the hook too fast because you wrote a great book called Little Sister. And I know we glossed over it in your answer because we're talking about today. But your backstory is incredible. I'm just reading off my paper here, a religious cult. Everybody, you got to go back to the episode we did before because the story is very detailed there, but get the book Little Sister. That in itself, I wrote down here, and then I'll give it back to you with a clarifying or follow-up if you want, that you talk about mentor versus role model and believe in me. Talk about, this is for all the youth and children out there, that some people say that belief comes from within. Belief and happiness and comes from within, joy, not from the outside world. However, what we're talking about here is a mentor, somebody who can build in you to see your belief. And why I drill down on the backstory is you're remarkable because you came from a very difficult early beginnings where you were separated, right, from the people who loved you and whatnot. So as a child, this is all going on in your head. And so you pushed through that, out of that, and found mentors and people around you. Were there any significant setbacks or mistakes along that path for you that helped shape your approach, going from the Little Sister chapter into this new world?
I probably made a mistake every other minute when I first came out. As I mentioned, the vocabulary, the language of the world was completely unbeknownst to me. I had never heard a swear word. I had never heard even any slang. And so I had to have my eyes open, my ears open, and my mouth closed till I could learn what things meant. I'd never heard of a single baseball player. I mean, I'm 18 years old at this point. I knew
That's
no
crazy.
one from Hollywood. And I remember sitting on a bus one day, and the man next to me seemed like a very nice gentleman, but I was very reserved and didn't tend to ever speak to strangers. And he turned to me and he said, "Has anyone ever told you you look like Lauren Bacall?" I had no idea who Lauren Bacall was. And I remember thinking to myself, Lauren Bacall, I have to remember that name so I can find out who she is. And at the time, I was banished from my home, but I could come home in the evening while I was at secretarial school. And so I asked my mother, whom I still referred to as Sister Elizabeth Ann, and I said, "Who is Lauren Bacall?" And she said, "Oh, darling, she is a beautiful actress." And for me, it was like, one, actresses in our community were of the devil. Hollywood was of the devil. And here's my mother, who would never speak that way while I was still in the organization, talking to me about a beautiful actress. And it was words that were brand new to me, the whole concept of an actress being beautiful. And then I suddenly thought, oh, somebody thinks I'm beautiful. And at that age of 18, I had no idea whether I was pretty, I was ugly. I mean, I knew I wasn't large, I was a pretty skinny girl, but I had no context for how to engage in the world. And that was very difficult, but that was a very favorable moment. But I think there's another story that you may be alluding to, which I tell in this book. And
yeah, please.
The words, pardon me?
Yeah, go ahead. Tell us that.
The words of the language was so unusual. And so I would, store words in my memory and then go look them up in a dictionary. And sometimes I was successful and sometimes I wasn't, because so many of these words were slang. And, there was no such thing as an urban dictionary at that point.
That's
so
right.
There was one word I just kept hearing over and over and over. Couldn't find it in any dictionary. And I finally thought, I just have to ask someone. And here I was in this secretarial school, and I had figured out who were the nice girls, who were the kind of rough girls, et cetera, et cetera. And for me, a girl that had gone to a Catholic school through high school and had nice manners was the most approachable. And I singled out one gal. I thought she was always friendly to me, even though we barely spoke. And so I thought, okay, I've got to get up all my courage and ask her what this word means. And it was a Friday afternoon, and I wouldn't be coming back till Monday. And so I just built up all my confidence for about 3 seconds and said, "Hi, can you tell me something? Can you help me with something?" She said, "Sure." I said, "What does the word shit mean?" And she just looked at me and she said, "Shit." And I went, "Oh my gosh. Oh, I'm so stupid. I still don't know anything." And I said, "Thank you. Have a nice weekend." And I walked out onto the street to get to the bus. And all I thought is, never, never, never again am I going to ask a single person about a single thing. I'm going to have to learn it all on my own. And so that was a big toe stub, as it were. But I had to pick up the pieces and keep on going.
Everybody, we're here with Patricia Chadwick, who's written the second book, but we're talking a bit about Little Sister, which you got to go get. But that just blows my mind. And, having interviewed me before, I understand this story. But everybody imagine, I know neuroscience because I went through recovering from my brain changes, that up until about age 25, really we lay down the pathways or all the emotions and memories and knowledge to navigate life. And here you are telling us at 18, you didn't know what Hollywood was. You didn't know what SHIT meant. You didn't know all this. Part of me, it evoked in me that I think your brain is probably cleaner in some ways than many of us, because a lot of the trauma I'm navigating in my current life, Patricia, and my background's being an executive, was I come from a maltreated childhood, addictive father, and left home and all that abusive stuff. I got to deal with those thoughts over and over. You had your own, but the real world wasn't unleashed on you, and I think that maybe is a blessing.
It might have been, yes.
Yeah, I kind of chuckle reading your book a lot. I love the bits of humor where you'll accomplish something. I'm not going to steal thunder, but Patricia writes about something she accomplishes, which is a high accomplishment, and then sometimes you just can't see in that you're good. And I kind of melt when I read that in a good way, that she's so good, but sometimes you just can't see it. And isn't that a relatable thread to you out there, the listeners, many of us? Are we good enough? Sometimes our brain just tells us we're not. Amazing. I want to go to another topic here, and that's the industry itself. So Wall Street, And my paper says navigating a male-dominated industry. So I'm just going to read you something I wrote down here and let you riff on it.
Sure.
So everybody, that's my other cam here. Wave at you if you're on the screen. You broke through this significant barriers in this male-dominated industry and earned the moniker Witch on Wall Street. I know you'll tell us about how that came about. How did you navigate the gender biases and challenges in that sector? And any strategies you employed to ensure your voice was heard and respected? And before you answer that, I grew up in the financial service sector, okay, so the banking industry here. My wife is a career banker too. In fact, her studio where she works is just down the way from mine. And I remember she used to tell me stories that when she got into her first administrative job in a branch as a teller, managers would have her come in and to sign admin reports and say, "Why don't you sit on my lap," kind of thing. And it was pathetic. And then I grew up as a male, and I'm shaped differently, Patricia. That's why I have so much respect for you and stories like yours, where you have to navigate it. That I would, as a male leader, I became a bank manager at age 21, and the guys, the VPs, would go out for lunches. They'd come back smelling like scotch because there was the gentleman's club. I used to go there with them. Very different world. And then they would come in and they would be putting their hands on the women, sort of doing things that today you would be arrested for.
Yeah.
So just going back to the question, you broke through that barrier, but tell us about how you navigated the biases and, how would you keep your voice heard and respected? There's a lot you wrote about.
Well, there were ups and downs, and there is a story that appears in both of my books because I think it is so important. And it was a story of abuse, and it was abuse by a very successful broker in my office. And he was thrice married, and he had lots of children and pictures all over his desk. And
just sorry to interrupt, but it brings me into the book. This is the one where I think he came on to you. Keep going, but I think it's that yes, story, right? Yeah.
He invited me out to have a drink, which wasn't particularly unusual. He often took the secretaries out. I was putting myself through school at night, so I never had a real chance to do any of that. And one day he just said, kind of haphazardly, how would you like to have a drink? And I had a course that night in political philosophy that I was very keen on. So I thought, okay, I'll just have a quick drink and then get over to Cambridge and, get my course in. And here was my own naivete. And all I remember was going into the bar, which was a very popular place, but it was a little on the early side. It was 5:00. And there was the bartender there, and he was at the bar. And there were 2 drinks. And the next thing I remember is waking up in my bed, and he was getting out of my bed. Now, wow. I go through the whole story, and I lay in bed terrified, not remembering anything about the drink or about anything. I was naive in a lot of ways at that point. I wasn't even 21 at the time. And I avoided drugs like anything because I thought the only asset I have is my brain, and I better not let anything happen to that. So I never took LSD, which was very, very popular back then. Never did cocaine. Yes, I did a little weed, but I was like Bill Clinton. I could never get high.
You didn't inhale.
And I didn't, people would take uppers to get through their study periods and all, none of that. So I was sadly horribly naive, and did not realize that someone could put something in your drink and control you. And then when I realized what had happened, I thought I must have been 1 in 5 million people. I didn't even dare tell my family. I was so horrified. And I knew I couldn't, even though I was respected and I had an important role, and the man who was the chief partner of the office was always telling me what a great job I was doing. I knew there was no way I could tell that story because that guy was the big producer and I was the 19-year-old in miniskirts at the front desk. Even naive as I was about a lot of things, I knew the power that lay outside of me. And I had to accept that. It was decades later that I told my parents what had happened.
Yeah,
But
thank you, Patricia, for sharing that story. Again, everyone, we're with Patricia, who wrote the book Breaking Glass, and I've read it cover to cover, but I've also listened to the audiobook. And by the way, the audiobook, I told you this before we came on, I love it because it's your voice. And the first thing, I was having fun with it. I was saying to my wife, "It sounds like a witchy kind of person, doesn't it?" And no, it sounded just like this beautiful voice, but it connected me to you. That's why, everybody, I believe in audiobooks. You got to have both, I think, because this you like to hold.
yes.
But the audiobook connects me deep. I want to say thank you for that, sharing that story. I wrote down on my paper here about, just some notes. I was making the storyline that 21 years old. And as we said earlier, you're not an adult really in scientific terms till 25. So, a woman can't really figure out those kind of experiences. Let me ask you a question about, given that situation, do you think that there's many, many other women out there who have experienced something like that? And in today's world, do you think you can get ahead still on your own merits without being taken advantage of that way? I don't know if I'm saying that correctly.
Well, as I said, I thought I was 1 in a million or 5 million, even at the age of 65 when I was writing that book. I don't know. Sometimes I just don't put things in perspective correctly. And then the Bill Cosby story started coming out. And then shortly after my book came out, the Harvey Weinstein stories were coming out. And I went, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
This happens. This is more, the rule than the exception. And it just changed my whole perspective. I felt as though I had comrades in arms of so many people whom I've never met. And I would dare say that the environment is meant to be much more protective in one way, but in another way, much more accountable of individuals' behavior.
Yeah.
Despite that being said, there is still plenty of manipulation, and plenty of people that don't feel they get their advancement because they haven't satisfied someone else's interest in them. And it is much better than it used to be. I will absolutely agree that, but it will never end. It will never end, and there will always be people who will deliberately try to abuse someone for their own advantage.
I want to honor you for what you're sharing there. I think that the world, I have a daughter who's just turned 26, just went to see her graduate. So proud of her. Environmental engineering actually is the field she's in.
Oh, great.
And, I look at people, like you said, you need mentors. I look at both men and women get harassed, they get abused and things.
Oh, yeah.
And I look at, what do you need to be successful? You need peer groups, you need mentors, people that you can learn and navigate. I also go back to Hollywood, and I have a lot to say about Hollywood. I'll leave it for this show, but the Wolf of Wall Street, some of these shows. But when you look at the world that you broke the glass ceiling in, it is a very unrelatable world to most of the people in the world, where drugs and alcohol and high power, all of that, I think really alters the brain of a human being, and they do stupid things. My father was a chronic alcoholic, and when he was drinking the disease, he was a different person. So
Yeah.
I think your lesson that you just taught us is to be aware, but also to develop some strategies. And everybody talk it out. Don't keep some things like that to yourself. Let's get into the next piece that came out of the book for me. Was I'm going like, wow, we didn't talk about your bio, but everybody, when I give it back to you, Patricia, to just tell us, when we hear break through the glass ceiling, just give us a Cole's Notes view of actually the accomplishments. So you went into Wall Street, but that's like, yeah, so what? A lot of people do. But you did some remarkable things. So maybe you can just give us a bit of the timeline, the resume. But what's behind this thought that I wrote down in the book was, what's the personal drive behind this high achievement? And I wrote, in reading your memoir, it's clear that you've consistently pursued high achievement throughout your career. Do you feel that your early experiences in the cult influenced the drive, or is it something else? And looking back, what would you say was your primary motivation in striving for success? Because to get up to that where you were, I mean, you pushed through a lot of obstacles, but there's something behind that.
Well, I do think that my childhood had perhaps a lot, in my case, to do with it. Now, let's all remember there are two parts to everything, and we are hardwired in certain ways. And I think I'm fortunate in being hardwired to have a certain kind of resilience. But
yeah.
Within my community, when I was separated from my parents, whom I could see every day but couldn't talk to, there was only one person who ran the organization. She was a woman. She was called Sister Catherine. She ruled with an iron hand, and all I wanted was to be loved by her, because I couldn't get that from my parents. They weren't allowed to speak to me. They weren't allowed to. I was the oldest of 5 children. There was all this separation. Only Sister Catherine could offer that love. And no matter what I did, I couldn't get it. Maybe for 2 days, she would smile at me and say, "That was wonderful, dear." I knew I had to revel in that, because within 2 days, I would be in trouble again. And I think that I never lost that wish to be accepted and loved by her, even though I never succeeded. And so I kept on. And then abruptly, in my senior year of high school, she informs me that I'm going to have to leave. And the reason I was going to have to leave, which she didn't describe in the way it was, I had started having crushes on boys.
How dare you?
How dare I? But she had already determined that all the children, there were 39 of us, and I was one of the oldest, would become religious, dedicated to God, and would forever be unmarried. I only knew what my instincts were making me do, which was obviously breaking the rules, because I shouldn't have had an interest in boys. So she decided, got to get rid of this person. But she used me in ways that were very advantageous to her. We needed to get our school. We were all schooled within this community, 100 people in total, 60 adults, 40 children. And she needed the school to be accredited. So she had me apply to 2 colleges. One was Vassar, and one was Bates, where my father had attended and had graduated.
Just for the international audience, what geographically, where are those universities?
So Vassar is called one of the 7 sisters. It was considered the most premier of women's colleges in the US, and it was in New York, not New York City, New York State, upstate a little bit. And Bates was up in Maine, and my father grew up in Massachusetts, and he went off to college up in Maine. I got accepted to both, and that was the reason that our school was accredited. But Sister Catherine told me as soon as I was accepted that I had to write a letter to each school saying I would not be coming. She had got out of me what she needed. She needed someone to get the grades, to get the application in and be accepted. And that was all she needed for me. And after that, I could be gone. But the interesting thing was, people have said to me, this is the world you're in is a male-dominated, hard-driving, take no prisoners kind of world. And it is. And occasionally I've been asked, well, didn't you ever think that, oh my God, this is all a male world. How am I going to do this? And fascinatingly, I never did. And in trying to really understand that, I looked back, who was the power, not even the power behind the throne. Yes, there was a Jesuit priest, Father Feeney, who was supposedly the leader. He was titular. She was the de facto leader. And I realized with the benefit of hindsight that from the time I was an infant till I was kicked out when I was practically 18, there had been only one person who had ruled, who had controlled, and who had power. And it was a woman. Yeah. So I think subliminally, for me, the idea of being a woman in a position that might be challenging or important didn't cause any anxiety on my part. And so in one way, while she was never a mentor to me, she was a role model. And I think that role model was value added to me.
Yeah, no, it's great. I just holding up the book here in the studio at the back of it. There's a quote. You talk about mentors. This one comes, it says, the smartest woman on Wall Street, Jack Walsh, former chairman and CEO of GE. In the book, everyone, and Patricia, I love the story about it. There's actually a really interesting twist in that story about how the moment you were with him when he said that, and then something had transpired in the work you were doing with that account, and that shifted that relationship. I'm not going to get you to tell that story because everybody, you got to get the book and read it. But I think this is a great lesson for women in the world up and coming, in that, you know, women, I personally, I've said this, and I say it with a lot of pride, that there's two types of leadership when I teach leaders from my background as being a leader: transactional and transformational. And women do transformational leadership so much better because they can use their emotional side. And the pathway to shifting, for anybody to shifting and, you know, changing their behavior, is through emotion. So I've been in the boardrooms with successful women like yourself, the kind who will come in and they'll be wearing suits with short haircuts, trying to look like and behave like a man. And the others who come in who show their feminine energy, maybe the little bit of a longer hair, you know, they're comfortable being who they are in themselves as a woman. And to me, that's why boards and things are shifting, at least here in Canada, that, you know, there's many women that need to break that glass ceiling. That's why everybody get this book and read it, because there's some nuggets in it about how, Patricia, you got there. Just tell us, when you talk about getting into Wall Street, just tell us the steps, almost like what the resume looked like, just for the audience.
Yes. So after that first position as a receptionist, where that broker, you know, really trapped me,
yeah,
I was so happy when I was offered a promotion to be a secretary. And that got me out of the reception area where I really didn't want to have to see him every day, and back in a different part. And the guy that we had hired was an analyst, a research analyst. And I call him my first mentor. He supported everything I wanted to do. I told him I needed to go to college at night so that I could get my degree. He made sure that I could always get out at the right time to get to my classes. He had worked at IBM. He had gone to the Harvard Business School, and he was creating a product for our customers. And he could code, and so BASIC was the language that was back then in the late 60s. And I went and learned BASIC so that I could. It was all these long strips of paper, but I could go and find errors, and you know, I just felt as though we were a team together. And from there, my best friend in the world was a few years older than I and knew nothing about my background. She told me that she had been offered a new job in Philadelphia. So we were up in Boston, and she was so close. And I thought, oh no, she's going to be out of my life. And she said to me, will you come with me? I was 23 years old at the time. I didn't even think for a second. I said yes. And suddenly there I was, leaving Boston, a place I really, really, really wanted to get out of, because I was so afraid people would find out who I really was, that I had grown up in this cult that everybody knew about. And so I moved to Philadelphia and was interviewed with 4 research analysts, 4 men, all of them in Brooks Brothers suits. And they were looking for someone that could crunch numbers for them. So one of them was in the airline industry, and one was in the railroad, and one was in the trucking, and one was in the insurance. And I was really interested because I had been doing some work in the airline industry. And so I thought, oh, I want to learn about more and more and more industries. So I had only one question for them. I said, I would really like to do more than just put numbers on a sheet of paper. Will you be willing, if I come to you and ask you why the numbers are like this and what those numbers mean, you will answer me? And I had already determined that if they said no, that they wanted me just to put the numbers on a sheet of paper, I was not going to take the job. All 4 of them said yes. All 4 of them came through for 2 years that I stayed there. And so there was a great example of them, all of them being mentors. One in particular, particularly wonderful mentor with whom I'm still a great friend today. So that after 2 years, that was 1974. The price of oil had gone through the roof. Inflation was through the roof. Interest rates were through the roof. The economy was through the floor, and the stock market was through the floor. That was the way it was. And I got laid off from this position because this firm was losing a lot of revenues as the market was going down. So I moved back to Boston. But by now, I had come through as a statistician, and I was really able to be an analyst. It took me a summer to find a job. And in September of 1974, I was offered a job at a small money management firm where I would be the analyst covering the savings and loan industry. So that's a banking industry. Now, remember what I just said. The interest rates were through the roof. The economy was through the floor. The banking industry was tanking. And I thought, why is he giving me this industry? It's a disaster.
Yeah.
But the guy was very bright, very, very bright, much older than I was. And he said to me, my door is always open. Come in anytime you have a question. And I did. And I asked him all kinds of questions. I said, I'm looking at these balance sheets, and I swear these companies are going to go out of business. And I'm thinking to myself, is he just testing me to see if I can figure it out? But it's 6 weeks into that job. I was at the bubbler getting some water, and I overheard two employees talking together. And they were talking about us, this little firm that I just joined, being acquired by a larger firm in Boston. And I went, whoops. So I made a beeline for the chief investment officer to whom I reported, and who had said his door was always open. So I walked right in and I said, are we being acquired? And he said, yes. And I said, does that mean last in, first out? I was the latest hire, and I thought, well, that's not very good. And he said, I'm afraid so. I had just turned 25 that summer.
What a roller coaster. I'm just going to interject, and then you can keep going so everybody...
Okay.
Patricia's book, Breaking Glass, Tales from the Witch of Wall Street. When I go back and I think about career paths and all these, you talk about the financial collapses, the subprime debacle,
right.
All the black money, all these things, all these little stories are in the book, everybody. So that's what makes it so cool is your career is not a straight line. When we read your resume, it looks like you've gone like this and wow, you're highly intelligent. But it's in I call it gut punches, the setbacks. So, yeah, keep going. I sort of stepped on you there.
Well, I had just come back to Boston from Philadelphia. I had just gotten this job 6 weeks later, and this tear comes down my face. I can't help it. And this gruff-voiced man said, don't cry. You'll make me cry.
Oh, boy.
And so I got up and I went back to my office, and about an hour later, he arrived in my office. I mean, it was like 20 feet away from him. And he said, I can't get you a job, but I can get you an interview. Tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, go to 666 Fifth Avenue, 29th floor, and you'll have an interview. And I spent the whole day in New York. That evening at dinner, the gentleman whom I had met, he had a little research boutique, only 6 or 7 people. They offered me a job for $17,500. My job in Boston was $12,000 at that time. So I went, whoa, that's practically a 50% increase. So I went home, flew back up to Boston that night, and so excited, but I lay awake all night because I thought, I've just moved back to Boston. This is where my family is. I was thinking of buying an apartment or something. I walked into Stu Harvey, was what his name was, at like 7:30, 8 o'clock the next morning. He was there, had a big smile on my face, and I said, I've been offered a job in New York. And I think he already knew, frankly.
Yeah.
At any rate, I said, but I've got this quandary. I just moved back to Boston. What do I do? And he looked at me. He had black eyes. And he looked me in the eye and he said, do you want to make it big in this world? I said, yes. He said, go to New York. And I did. And I knew that man for all of 3 months of my life. And he was a mentor that was invaluable to me.
And
that
how old
was
were
a
you?
huge
How old
change.
were you when you set foot in New York again?
I was 25.
Yeah, think about that. I have some friends, a family actually that runs an entrepreneurial business. Their son's a trader, just living in New York, and we just see in Hollywood, but very, very different world. And again, amazing. I just wrote this down on my paper here. I got to share this with you as we're riffing. I don't know if you could see it, but I put the word cry, and then. You know, it's funny that a guy will say, "Don't cry or you'll make me cry." And that's one of the things I thought, because when I was reading your book, I thought, coming from the cult and what you went through, you're so tough. Is she tough and hardened, or is she open enough that she can show that emotion? And I wrote down here, no, dude, you should be telling her it's okay to cry, because that vulnerability is actually what the strength is all about. But I
But
wrote
it was sweet because he was admitting that he was going to cry too. So
yeah,
he was vulnerable.
yeah, and you were helping him by showing him yours. I think that's awesome.
Yes.
But what's funny is 666 Fifth Avenue. My first breakthrough job in my financial career was at 666 Burrard
Really?
Street down in Vancouver, a big, tall skyscraper. So you took me back. Thank you for that. Hey, Patricia, hold up the book again. And
Yes.
all right,
Oops,
there it is.
got this.
Breaking Glass, the Tales from the Witch of Wall Street. Before we keep going, I have a couple of quick more questions. What's behind the title, Tales from the Witch of Wall Street? It's evocative. I love it. Catchy.
So I'm now just about 76 years old. My book came out just a couple of months ago. But the first story in my book is the story of how I learned I had the moniker Tales from the Witch of Wall Street. And it came from 5 years earlier when some of my friends from Wall Street threw me a 70th birthday party. And this woman got up and was sharing with people how she met me. And it was 1985, and she was working for Bear Stearns. And the head of institutional sales came to her and said, I need your help. We have this very large account at Citicorp. And there's a portfolio manager there who manages a lot of money. But I've got a problem. I've put numerous salesmen on her account, and they're all afraid of her. I still can't quite believe this, but and he said,
why were they afraid of you? What did they see?
In one way, because I was tough. I had been an analyst. I was now a portfolio manager. And if they told me something about a stock that they thought and their firm was recommending, I wanted to know more than just 2 sentences. I would go, well, what about this? And what about this? And what about this? And what about this? Which meant that they had to go back and do more work.
Oh, boy. It. Well, some would say, from my perspective, that you weren't tough. You were doing your job, and actually you're building, basically building skills in the people around you, because you're saying, here, I need this. And how you deliver that message is 2 different ways, right? And that's one of the things I wrote on my paper here is I wonder if men saw you as intimidating, because I hate to say it, there's 2 standards, and that's why I honor you, Patricia. A guy can walk in a room and say, you didn't give me this, give me this, give me this. And it's like, okay. A woman does it, and sometimes the man will be intimidated and say, how dare you, you know.
Well,
so good for you.
You hit the nail on the head. So exactly. This woman said, I'd heard of her, but I'd never met her. All I knew is that when I went to the trading floor, they referred to her as the Witch of Wall Street. Now, at that point, only 5-6 years ago, I was like, what? I never heard that. So after that, I thought a lot about it. And then I realized, and I thought and said, okay, so a man who is impatient and, pushy and requires exact answers before he makes a decision might be considered to have leadership qualities and might be called the Wolf of Wall Street. When a woman does it, and can get her named the Witch of Wall Street. And I decided then, because I was almost afraid to use the subtitle. And then I said, no. Let it be a badge of honor and enjoy it.
I just put a chat in the YouTube. Everybody, I'm putting notes there saying sometimes I know people are watching because I can see in the dashboard chat with us. So you can put in your feed wherever you're listening or watching. You can put a question or comment. These will be etched into the show permanently. So I just threw mine up there. The Witch of Wall Street is awesome. I just think that's really cool. Like there's women all over the place listening to you, reading your book, who are cheering, saying yes, because living vicariously through you, because you have that resilience and toughness that men have, but you're derided sometimes for not lauded, and that's just BS. Tell us quickly, this was a really cool moment in the book where you were invited, I think it was Bahamas, there's only 50 people, invited to some round table. Now, we're talking about the high-powered parts of this industry. Just tell us about that, because there's something cool about what happened in that room.
Well, yeah, oh, I think I know the story you're referring to. Yeah, so it was Morgan Stanley every year had a conference down in Lyford Key, which is in the Bahamas. And it was 1990, I believe. And I was invited. And it was quite interesting because there was a huge conference room. The Lyford Key Club was the Lyford Key Club, and there were corporations that met there all the time. Huge conference room. And there were basically 50 of Morgan Stanley's clients there. And I was one of them. But what was fascinating was there couldn't have been more than 5 out of the 50 who were women. And so I found myself in a unique situation. But I also, you could sense the testosterone in the room. It was really palpable. And everybody was a hedge fund manager. And I was not a hedge fund manager. I was a long only manager. And my personality just would never allow me to short a stock, because if I'm shorting a stock, I'm saying, I hope this company doesn't do well. I hope nothing that they does can make them earnings and the stock go up. And so I'm ultimately rooting for the demise of the company. And all I could think of was, what about all those employees? So I just always, the only way was for me to see the glass half empty. Half full, sorry, instead of wishing the worst. But they were big powerhouses. And I used to wonder, are they all sharing the same information? I was a bit of a skeptic because, in the investment business, you have to be a bit of a skeptic.
Yeah. I agree. And going back again to when like my father, for example, I'm just bringing this in and riffing because my brain goes on a journey. My father he passed away in 2018. I really miss him. I love my dad. I was estranged most of my life, but my dad worked hard. He was in the union. He was an electrician, journeyman, became a teacher of apprentices. And he had $100,000 in a teacher's pension that through Bernie Madoff's scam, he lost that. God. And I've met, people don't talk about it, but the show I do here, people come on and they share their stories. So you hear about it. That, sometimes I think about the industry, and I think you're right to be skeptical because many people in the public don't trust advisors sometimes, or we hear these stories. Yeah. And I won't get into it. We'll have you back talk about that in more detail maybe, but you watch some of the documentaries that are made on things like the subprime collapse, and if you were in corporate America, you'd lose your job. Somebody would be held accountable. So I think you're a breath of fresh air sitting around a table because you bring that realness, that skepticism. That's what I like about the book, is you write in a way where you are relatable. Want to move to the last question here. There's a part of the book that just lights up me, and that is you're humanized because there's threads of you personally in your story. So we hear about your relationships. You told us a hard story earlier on, which we honor you, about the waking up and realizing something bad had happened to you. And then there's meeting your partners. But the one about to get pregnant and then eventually how that evolved, just tell us, because there's a celebratory part of that. And tell us about the guy in your life, because he sounds like a very special man.
Yes, well, I got married at the age of 36 or 7. I don't know why. I never remember exactly what it was. And he had, my husband had 3 children. The oldest of whom was in college, and he was 10 years older than I was.
Right? Is it John?
John, absolutely. Yeah, John Chadwick. And then a couple were teenagers. And, we went on. I was very happy that I didn't lose a step being married, didn't make it less easy for me to have a career, because I was a bit of a perfectionist and I didn't want to fail at anything. And then I turned 40 and I kept thinking to myself, I know I want children. And here was John, totally happy with his 3 children. And he had to have assumed that I was okay with life that way. But I wasn't, and I hadn't had the ability to share that before we got married. So here we were in New York, my 40th birthday, and we're out to dinner at a beautiful restaurant. And dinner's halfway through, and I said, I have to talk to you about something. And I basically said, I have to tell you this now, because if I wait 10 years, I will be an angry woman and there'll be nothing I can do about it. I said, I want to have children with you.
I'm sorry to laugh, but when I read the book, I put myself sitting across from you. And I think my wife will tell you, because she's outgoing and more stronger, communicate. I think my personality is a lot like John. So I remember the way you depicted it, his quietness around it was funny, but go ahead. Sorry.
So he was quiet and he said, I wasn't expecting this. So we then talked about it. We really had soulful discussions. And then he came on board. And for the next, now I was 40. So we worked very, very, very hard with lots of science to help us. And we were successful. And at the age of 45, I had twins.
Well, we're going to give you some applause. That
was just the highlight of my life, frankly.
Well, thank you. And this is a teaching moment on the show, everyone, because we're talking to Patricia, and her story is about rising and breaking the ceiling in career. But we know, and we talked about this up front, right, Patricia, where you connect the dots to global, what's happening, to industry and personal.
Yeah.
And if you're not happy or there's something missing inside, then those other things don't necessarily, right? The messages that I'm getting, and for all those out there who look at Patricia like I do, is especially for the young women in their careers, mentoring from Patricia, there's a lot of nuggets here. One is you're good enough. And, I remember when I did my first TED Talk, I said that I was a self-worth chaser, not a success chaser. People look at me on the outside saying, wow, Tom, you're accomplished, you have all the things you want in the world, but there was this hollowness. And it wasn't until I did all my self-work, and I might have told you this before, that self-work meetings through counseling and reading and learning, what is that thing missing? And it was not understanding that my father actually loved me, because he left too early at 12, and I didn't have that in my head. It's such a powerful thing. So I was going to fulfill that through achievement and workaholism and all these things. It wasn't until I had my daughter that my life changed. And why my story, I relate a bit on the age side, is my wife was 41, I was 31 when we lost our first son. It was a tough one because of complications, but it changed my life. And so I think that's a good segue now to the last question, which is around impact on society and future goals. It's so beautiful in there when you were talking about the birth of your children. And by the way, everybody, there's really cool stories around it, especially in the hospital. And it didn't exactly go like super smooth. There were challenges. But then you had this revelation about, wait a minute, family's important too. And you made some shifts. So tell us about sort of what you're doing now in society, how you're balancing all that, and your future goals.
So I was 45 when my children were born. And by the time I was 51, I had made the decision I needed to make a shift in career. I was at the top of my career and my children were going into kindergarten. And I said, I want to be answering the questions they're going to have henceforth. It's fine when they're really little and it's all about play dates. And so with a great advice from my husband, I quit Wall Street when I was 51 years old. And I had no idea what I would do except for a career, except that I was going home and I was going to be raising my children. And I was enormously happy doing that. However, I also needed to be intellectually stimulated. And I continued to go on television, which I did a lot, being on Squawk Box and places like that. And out of that evolved another career, which allowed me much more flexibility of time because I now was doing expert witness work, which led into going on corporate boards. Now I've reached the situation where I'm being forced off corporate boards because I'm over 75 years old. And another opportunity has arisen for me over these last years, which is mentoring. And mentoring young women, for the most part, in high school and college. And then also, about 8 years ago, I co-founded an organization, a healthcare company for the LGBTQ community. And
that's Anchor
I've had
Anchor
so
Health.
many friends. I watched the AIDS epidemic just kill hundreds, millions of people. And I felt there was something that they needed, but I didn't have a totally vested interest until I started to become involved.
Yeah.
And for me, I am the pro bono CEO, and I just feel it's my final life's work. I'm not saying I want to disappear anytime soon, but it's a great way to go out, frankly.
Well, congratulations. The company name, will be in the notes we put out, is Anchor Health Initiative, or Anchor Health.
Yes.
Congratulations. This thing about boards, it's kind of interesting, right? Because I get interested in getting on boards and being on boards, and I kind of say to myself, okay, age shouldn't always matter, because they say the difference between knowledge and wisdom is time, and sometimes, I mean, you look at Berkshire Hathaway and one guy's past, but you look at the wisdom. The stuff the wisdom in your head, and you get it when you read your book. Everybody, that's why we need to plug the book. We'll do that again in a minute. But you need to get the book, but the wisdom in your head belongs on boards. What I think is really cool is they say that in order to be fulfilled, be in service to others. So this is an honor teaching moment. Everyone, come back, listen to this. That here you are, you're at 76. You look amazing, by the way. For somebody who's done what you've done, raised a family, good for you. But you're giving back, mentoring, coaching, being on boards, pro bono CEO, helping the world. I just really think that's awesome. So now it's time to reveal your book review. You ready for that? Okay. I'm going to put it on screen and I'm going to read it. Now I have a little bit of vision challenge because of my concussion pass, so just have to bear with me. So I'm going to see if I can do this. Just hold on, Patricia. So everybody, drum roll, please. I'm going to read. This is just posted yesterday on Amazon.ca. That's Canadian Amazon. It's all connected. It's a 5-star international book review for, the book we've been talking about. And I'd like to read it. The title of the review, From Cult to Wall Street Titan. As a fan of Patricia Walsh Chadwick's first memoir, I eagerly anticipated her latest work, Breaking Glass. Tales from the Witch of Wall Street. The second memoir did not disappoint. Listening to the audio version, narrated by Patricia herself, added an authentic and deeply personal touch to her compelling narrative. Her journey is nothing short of remarkable, from being expelled from a religious cult at 17 to climbing the corporate ladder on Wall Street. Her stories, one of resilience and determination. Starting as a receptionist at a brokerage firm, she worked her way up to become a global partner at Invesco, all while pursuing a college degree at night. The moniker, which we've talked about and I love, is the Witch of Wall Street. It's a testament to her unyielding drive and tenacity in a male-dominated industry. What stands out in Breaking Glass in Patricia's candid storytelling is the book is filled with drama, provocatively pushes the jagged edges of her life experiences, yet it remains as a testament to the breaking through the proverbial glass ceiling. Patricia's voice in the audiobook version is captivating, bringing an added layer of authenticity to the story. His memoir picks up seamlessly from where her first book, Little Sister, left off. While Breaking Glass stands strong on its own, I recommend reading Little Sister for a fuller understanding of the backstory and the challenges she faced. It was published in May 24. This book is a must-read for anyone seeking an inspiring tale of triumph over adversity. Patricia Walsh Chadwick's story is not just about surviving, but thriving against all odds. I highly recommend it. Blah, 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 Tom Dutta. Congratulations.
Oh, my goodness. Thank you. Wow.
I'm going to remove that off the screen. Now, everybody, before we move to give it back to Patricia to wrapping up, why do we do this? Patricia, nod your head. I think you'll agree. But authors' work isn't known. It's known when we have our fans read our books, when they go and post reviews, And when we post a review on Amazon, Goodreads.com, wherever Patricia wants you to post it, go do it, everyone, because sales store representatives, other buyers look at that, and it gets our brain thinking there's something really great going on with this book, and it gets the word out there. So that was posted and should be live on Amazon.ca. The last thing I want to do is honor you with 4 words. We do this every show. It's written on my paper here. As Patricia's talking, I write down leadership words. First one is resilience. Second one is strength. Oh, my goodness. That's you. Third is mentor. And fourth is maven. If you want to know anything on the topic of how to break the glass ceiling coming from adversity and being a dynamic woman in the business world, this is your lady. So, hey, on that note, I'm going to give it back to you for the last word where people can get a hold of you. Anything you want to say before we wrap up?
Well, thank you, Tom, so much. This has been a wonderful hour. I do have a website, and it's very simple, patriciachadwick.com. It has a lot of information and a lot of interviews from both this book, that's only been out a couple of months, and my first memoir, Little Sister. And of course, you can hopefully buy the book at your own local bookstore, and they can certainly order it for you. But of course, if you want to get it online, it is there. And as Tom said, yes, I did record the audio version. But thank you very much for having me.
Okay, you're welcome. And everybody, as we wrap up here, I wrote down one more word, unconscious bias. It is true that sometimes, whether you have colored skin or you're a woman in business, there is an unconscious bias that people will see you through. Live life with purpose, with passion. Live the life that you deserve and desire, because you heard right here how Patricia's done that. You're just awesome, Patricia. So see you again on the Quiet Warrior Show, everybody.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening to The Quiet Warrior Show. Create is a motive-based leadership development firm. www.kreat.ca.
Hi there, we're going to take it offline. We're still online, so hold on. We had